we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Not live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. That's right, this week, because my work is crazy and we are around the clock doing all kinds of cool, crazy work stuff at where I work over the weekend. This is being pre-recorded, so if all goes according to plan, this should be broadcasting on November 4th, and then, going out as a podcast a few days after that. Got a really cool guest I'll introduce here in a moment who's actually local, and I've been hoping to connect with, and met him through our mutual friend Dave Ellswick on the Dave Ellswick show, and then he agreed to come on this show for some reason. I guess he needs to go get a psychological examination. I don't know, but like I said, I'll introduce the super secret mystery guest here in a moment. First, I got the old housekeeping notes that we need to get through. First of all, I am your host, Shane Sachs. Thanks so much for listening, whether you're listening over the radio on Saturday or during this football period. You might be listening on Sunday, which I'll get into here in a moment, or if you're listening by podcast or on Krypton Radio. I'm so glad to have you. Thank you for tuning in. This is Geek Talk Radio. It's like, sports talk radio or political talk radio or, hey, my car's broken talk radio, but it's Geek Talk Radio. But since I love radio and podcasts, I also push it really hard as a podcast. And I have listeners on both sides. So thanks so much. I want to make another note. If you're a first time listener, if you haven't listened in a while, there's Ouachita Baptist football going on right now. So from October 7th through November 11th, and we do this every year, I temporarily broadcast at my normal time of Saturdays at 1 p.m. Central. But during that time, I'm on our sister station of 99.5 Faith Talk. So if you're listening on Saturday on Faith Talk and you're like, what the heck is Shane Plays Geek Talk? That's what's going on. And then after November 11th, we'll revert to our normal schedule. Now, also during this time, we rebroadcast the show on my home station of 96.5 FM, The Answer, on Sundays at 5. And then, of course, like I said, it'll go out as a podcast and et cetera a few days after the show broadcasts over the air. So hope you enjoy it, I'm excited to have listeners who may not otherwise know about the show get to listen. But anyway, that's the deal, and we'll all be back to normal normal is a relative term, but we'll be back to normal on November 11th or the weekend following November 11th. Steve, was that clear as mud?
Yes, sir. Clear as mud.
Okay, got Steve, the one, the only, Steve Marston, running the board. Zach, our normal guy, is during this time, sometimes, working the football. But today I'm pre-recording, it's like a Tuesday or something, like a week and a half ahead of time. Yeah, so Steve is ably running the board in there. But take heart, Zach fans. Zach will be back. So, but we've got the more than able and capable Steve in the meantime. Are you the operations manager here at Salem?
That's what the business card
That's
says.
what the business card says. All right. Well, you do a darn fine job, sir.
Well, thank you.
Darn fine. All right. Folks, don't forget that if you're listening to this in the podcast version, well, heck, since it's pre-recorded, it may be up during the radio broadcast version. But if you're listening podcast or Krypton Radio, the show notes for today's show will be up at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. Again, this is pre-recorded. Don't try to call or tweet during the show. But if you want to, send me an email or a tweet at shaneplays.com that I'll get later, feel free. Love to get your feedback. Last week's show is out. It's on the site at shaneplays.com. It's out as a podcast, all that. And if plans go as expected, it should have been Star Trek Discovery, because that was the show that I have planned for October 28th. So if all of this time change and everything isn't already confusing enough. And then but just, we do go out, the show goes out as a podcast on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, and more, including YouTube. I put it on the YouTube channel at Go Shane Plays. And then last but never ever least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi, kryptonradio.com, and we're played a week delayed on Saturdays and Mondays on Krypton Radio. Okay, got all those housekeeping notes out of the way. I'm going to introduce my super secret cool guest. And this is comics artist and illustrator Timothy Lim, a.k.a. Ninjaink. That's right. Timothy Lim, a.k.a. Ninjaink. Timothy, welcome to Shane Place.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and I guess there's something you wanted to share with us?
Yes.
Okay.
I have to say before we start that as an employee of UAMS and UALR, any opinions that I state today on this podcast do not reflect those of my employer or those of any of the freelance individuals who hire me for other professional duties.
All right, fair enough. So Timothy is here representing himself.
Correct.
Anything he says is his opinion. So, and if folks may not know, I didn't find out till recently. You're a literal doctor.
Yeah, I have a doctorate degree, so it's not quite an MD, but it's a doctorate in audiology. So I received that doctorate in 2011. So I'm a practicing audiologist.
That's amazing. So not only are you already an accomplished comics artist and illustrator, but I think I joked around with you when I first met you. I like, you're going to further emasculate me. That you're a PhD, you know, it's like, wow, what, you know, anyway, really impressive. So tell us a little bit about what you do as a doctor of audiology.
Basically, what audiologists do is we diagnose and we treat hearing loss primarily.
Yeah.
And we also look at people with balance
I'm
disorders.
sorry, what'd you say?
Exactly.
I know, I'm sorry, you get that joke all the time.
We do.
I apologize.
It's the most common thing that we hear.
Yeah, I apologize.
And I made a joke, too.
Yeah? Oh, that you hear.
Yeah, that you hear.
Nice.
Exactly.
Nice. So you're like seeing patients and you're diagnosing and you're...
And teaching, too. I also teach undergraduate and graduate courses as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but where in the heck do you find time to also be a comics artist?
It's part-time. I literally divide my time in half. So about 3 days a week, I'm teaching and seeing patients, and the other 2 full days a week, I'm drawing and taking care of my freelance duties.
Okay. Hey, Steve, ask Dave to come in here.
Okay.
Dave Ellswick just walked in.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Folks, if you don't, I don't think, you've heard Dave Ellswick on the show before, but he just walked in. I saw him talking to Steve. So
troublemaker here.
Yeah. Dave has cut his hair, so I'm going to ask him about that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But okay. So you're literally a doctor of audiology. So what's the most common tinnitus? What's the most common thing you diagnose?
Tinnitus is a big one, but that tends to be a symptom that's associated with hearing loss. So there's a good chance that if you have tinnitus, you have hearing loss, but not all people necessarily will have both together. But hearing loss is probably the most common thing that I see on a daily basis. I know I've
lost range on my hearing because when I'm watching movies and TV now, we put the subtitle, and I'm only like 45.
Oh yeah,
and we put the subtitles on because we missed just enough of, hey, what'd they say? So I know I've lost some of my upper and lower range.
Yeah.
Dave Ellswick, how the heck are you?
Well, you know what I hate about looking at the words on the screen?
What's that?
Is that when they speak in a foreign language, it says speaking in foreign language.
Yeah.
Instead of telling you what they're saying.
Well, sometimes the subtitles will spoil stuff because they'll put like the character's name in there and it reveals like a reveal that's coming. So I've had that happen.
True.
Here's one, it's good to see you.
Good
so I
to
can't
see
have
you.
you cruise by and not say hi on my
show. You like
show.
my new dude?
That's why I brought you in. You're a Lex Luthor.
I am.
Yeah, you're a supervillain now.
I have cut all my hair off.
Yeah, so folks, if you don't, this is Dave Ellswick. I'm actually, when I broadcast, I almost always broadcast out of his studio, and he's got a show here. It's not just political talk. I mean, he geeks out, and you have fitness. I mean, you have all kinds of
we do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, and you've been on the air in the Little Rock area for how long? Like
17 years.
Yeah. So if you're not already, you need to listen to the Dave Ellswick Show Monday through Friday, 2 to 6 p.m. What you are now that with that new you are Lex Luthor building your Legion of Doom.
I've always had a Legion of Doom.
You're the Legion of Doom.
I got all these listeners. Yeah. You know what our doom is? Our doom is the stupid politicians.
Yeah.
That's what my doom is. Okay.
Hopefully.
I don't want to get into a political discussion with you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. You're always welcome on the show.
What are you talking about?
Well, we're talking with Timothy about what his career in comics, and then also his upcoming book, what is it? Thump, the First Bundred Days that's coming out very soon. So yeah.
Talking about the bunny rabbit again.
The bunny rabbit again.
Yeah.
Actually,
Absolutely.
I'll be here tomorrow to hand you one because the shipment's actually coming in today.
Oh, very
so
cool.
I'll be stopping by again tomorrow.
Signed, of course.
Signed.
All
Correct.
Yeah, so that's going to be really cool. But yeah, you're welcome to stay. But yeah, we were just getting into talking about that he was a doctor and, you know,
He's an
also
audiologist.
audiologist. And also, you know, I'm like, how the heck do you have time for comics? So what you had said was that you split your time evenly.
Correct.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very cool. So how has that kind of grown over time, or did you start your comics before you got your PhD, or how did that all happen?
No, when I was getting my degree, it actually fell into my lap kind of by accident. What I ended up doing was someone had told me that I could make a lot of money in merchandising art. And so at the time, up until, say, 7 years ago, I didn't even know I could break into the comics mold through a back door. And essentially, I got my start doing merchandising art. And it's only been within the last 3 years that I've been doing comic book covers. And even that fell into my lap by accident.
So is that the extent? I mean, right now you just focus on, have you done any even short, assignments as far as like interior art, or is it all covers, or?
It's great that you mentioned that because back in the day, about 8 years ago, I used to do web comics. And what I found out was I was very slow with sequentials. And so I gave up on that. And what's happened recently is I've gotten better at it. And so that's the number one question that people have is, when are you going to start doing sequentials? Or are you even available to do them? And I'm proud to announce that I am, but it's going to be starting next year. We're already working on it. And it's actually going to be, and I'm guessing, I think your show is going to be the first one where we're announcing this.
Oh, cool.
But we're working on another comic, a Trump comic, and it's going to be called My Hero MAGADEMIA. So MAGA. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know it sounds corny, but what we found out was with the success of Thump,
Right.
we found out that it's a very viable market. And so people are wanting more.
Well, cool. That's really cool. So do you, any idea of a publisher or anything yet?
We do have a publisher, but I can't announce who it is formally yet.
Okay.
But that news is coming up pretty soon.
Okay, cool, man. That's really exciting.
Have you seen
Dave, I got an exclusive. Did you hear that?
I heard it.
I just got an exclusive.
Have you seen his work?
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Kidding? I'll tell you the first time I saw your work, Timothy, where I started recognizing the artist before I knew who you were, was, I think we talked about this before. And folks, if you're listening, you've probably seen these. So if you don't know who Timothy is yet, this will probably, you'll go, oh, you were doing the mashups between Star Wars and Calvin and Hobbes.
Not a lot of them, but a few of them.
Yeah, and those were fantastic. And that's where I was like, and I was talking with Michael Tierney at Collector's Edition, who's, one of the sponsors for the show. And he had one in there. I was like, I love those. And he's like, that guy's local. And then I started, seeing more. And now you do your stuff under Ninjaink.
Correct.
Right?
That's my company name.
So describe, like, if you wanted to give the best representation, if somebody said, I want to see what this guy's style's like,
right,
what would you recommend them go look up?
That's a hard one because if they go to ninjaink.com, and that's ink with a K, they'll find that my years of working in merchandising, one of the tasks that I had, probably the reason I was hired, was because I was self-taught. I had to learn a variety of styles. I had to learn how to paint, I had to learn how to draw, and I had to learn how to finish everything from beginning to end. So what they'll see is that it's hard to pin down my style because I've spent 8 years basically just cultivating a variety of them. So when they see it, they'll think it's multiple artists doing it.
Oh,
when
but
in
you've
reality,
got that range.
Correct. And
Yeah.
the best way I ever heard it described complimentarily was by IO9. And about 7 years ago, they described my style as chameleonic. You don't realize it's one artist doing everything. And that's because basically from the get-go, I was always told, you're going to have to draw and adapt pretty quickly based on what we want. Maybe for one piece, we want something more like a Patrick Nagel-inspired piece. For another thing, it might be more along the lines of Adam Hughes or Frank Cho. Can you adapt that? Can you not necessarily master the way that they do it, but can you do something in a similar vein?
Right, that kind of evokes that kind of feel or
Correct.
whatever. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Can you do it in Vargas style?
I do. I can do it in the Vargas style. That's actually one of the more
Do
popular
you even know
requests.
what I'm talking about?
I don't.
Have you ever looked at a Playboy magazine?
Oh, yeah.
You remember the pinups that they
Yeah,
had?
so that was Vargas?
That was Vargas,
Okay.
yeah.
I like-
Leave it to Dave. Dave Ellswick, ladies and gentlemen.
They were great, though.
So, I'm looking. I found your I'm looking right now, Timothy. I found your My Hero MAGADEMIA right here.
Right. You can see the preview art online. It's floating around out there.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay. So it sounds to me like, all right, Dave Ellswick's leaving. Dave, always a pleasure. You're always welcome on the show. Ellswick is leaving the building. So take care. It sounds to me like you knew kind of early on or kind of growing up that you wanted to do art.
Correct.
So how did you go from that to also pursuing this? Because it sounded like you started your art before you went into audiology.
Correct.
So how did that happen?
Well, it probably came from my Asian upbringing. I was told from a very early age that while art was a good hobby, it was not something that you could make money on. So I never had any intention of ever making money doing art. I kept it up as a hobby, the thing that I did when I wasn't working. And so by keeping that up, I always kept in practice. And it wasn't until, again, I was recruited or found a venue in merchandising that I discovered, wait a minute, this starving artist myth is kind of a myth. You can find money doing art, but it depends on what art you're doing and for what medium. And what I discovered was the money in merchandising is really good, but the problem is that the notoriety and the fame is not. If you think about it, you go to a Walmart, a Kohl's, a Target, a Hot Topic, you buy a t-shirt. You never ask yourself, I wonder who did the art on this t-shirt. We just tend to assume that the art's floating around out there, it's pasted on the shirt, and that's all that the consumer wants. And what I discovered was it was actually a little bit harder for me to sell myself into those markets because people didn't know who I was. And then I would show them some of the the designs I did, and they would say, oh, you did that. And I said, yeah. And then I realized I need to start selling myself as an independent artist who can actually do work for the printed medium on comics in order to get that level of fame or notoriety. Okay, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, that's a good place to, we're about to go to a break. We come back, I'm going to ask you more about I want to know, what was the first comic book you can remember reading that made you kind of want to, it's like, hey, this is something I'd like to do. Right. So I want to kind of get into that. What are you reading right now that's good or special? And also, you've made no bones about the fact that you are, you're an outspoken conservative in the industry. So I'd also like to get your take on what that's like. Absolutely. Because that's coming up more and more often. People being open about their political beliefs can have repercussions in the comic book industry. So I want to talk about that. So we're going to go to a break right here on Shane Plays Geek Talk with Timothy Lim, aka Ninjaink, the comic book artist, illustrator, and doctor, as if all that wasn't enough. And we'll be back after this short break on Shane Plays Geek Talk.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into things we love. Our guest today is Timothy Lim, who is a illustrator and comics artist, who has, described before the break, has a very varied art style. I think that you said that IO9 described it as chameleonic almost, because of your background in commercial illustration. Timothy, one of the things that came to mind while you were telling me about your background before you kind of moved over or also started doing comics art, I was just reading an interview, and I wish I could remember her name, but she's doing art on Star Trek for IDW right now on the Boldly Go series. And she did TV commercial storyboards before she got into comic books. And she said that really, like, she can draw a room, like, and fill in all the little details of the room. And that's one of her strengths, that, she can draw backgrounds and stuff because of that, because she did so much of that, for commercial art. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if you want to be a comic book artist, it's good to vary your strengths, right? Because it's not just the Jack Kirby punching the guy, Jack Kirby-esque, superhero fight. I mean, there's a lot more to it.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things that you have to do is your range has to be good enough that you can at least fool the human eye in a split second that it takes to read through a panel. Most of us, whenever we read comics, I think diehard fans take a little bit more time. We actually dissect the page, but your casual reader, all they have to do is just be led from A to Z without ever stopping and questioning what's happening on the panel. And I do that too. With my experience in merchandise, it wasn't too often that I had to draw a background. For the most part, it's a foreground character on the t-shirt. The t-shirt is the background. And so that's actually a weakness of mine, is I'm having to train myself from the ground up on how to do backgrounds, because that's not something that I was used to. Whereas if you're a storyboard artist, that's pretty much all that you're doing is learning composition of objects in plane and finding out how they interact with each other. So my advice to people who are interested in comics is there's only so much that you can fake. And at some point, people are going to call you out on it, or they're going to start noticing that that's where your weakness lies. And I'm pretty upfront about my own.
So did Rob Liefeld ever end up drawing backgrounds? Because that's what he was kind of known for, not having backgrounds, right?
Backgrounds and feet. Not too many feet, but I can't blame him. I think any artist who calls him out on the whole feet issue, they need to take a look in the mirror, because a lot of us have trouble doing it. To be frank, I always have a reference on my phone, and it's a 3D reference a 3D model that I can shift and move. And I use it all the time for helping to draw feet, because frankly, in most shots, that's not something I'm used to drawing. Right. I like drawing shoes. Shoes are a lot easier to draw, in my opinion, than feet. You can tend to fudge some of the details. Feet, it's a very precise anatomy. And as a result of that, people will be able to tell when a foot looks wonky or not.
It's just one of those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and, every artist, no matter how good they are, always has that one thing. Like John Byrne is one of my favorite comic books artists.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
His kids, to me, always look a little off. Their faces always look a little older to me than what they should. So it's like every artist, no matter how amazing they are, always has that one thing that, you can call out and say, oh, that's just that one area that they're kind of a little bit off on or different in or whatever you want to call it. So, but yeah, I love John Byrne. Off on a little bit of a rabbit hole, actually, since we're going to be talking about rabbits a little bit in today's show.
Yes, we are.
Did you like that tease?
I did.
You like that tease? Have you seen these photo montage Star Trek books that he's doing?
John Byrne?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Oh, they're amazing. He's telling like full episodes of original series Star Trek in sort of a bonus size, like a larger than normal size comic book issue. And it's all photoshopped using like original photography from the original series. And and it looks amazing. In some ways, I'm just as impressed with that as I am like his artwork. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, and he's a master of his craft.
Yeah, I love John Byrne. I've always loved it. He was one of the first, when I was reading comics heavily in the 80s, he was one of the first artists that I started going, that's John Byrne. Like I could tell, like, this is, I started distinguishing who the artist was. So yeah, I love his artwork, but we're not here to talk about John Byrne. We're here to talk about the next master of the craft, Timothy Lim. How'd you like that?
I liked it. That's very flattering.
You like that? All right. So what was, I said before the break, I wanted to ask you, like, what was the first comic book you can remember, maybe not necessarily reading, but it seems like most artists or writers that are in the industry have that one defining moment when they can remember looking at a comic book and saying, I want to do that. I want to, do you have that?
I have two, actually.
Okay.
And in my head, I can't remember which one comes first. I'm pretty sure that they both happened within a week of each other. But the first comic I can remember actually reading was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures #1. And at the time, it was at the height of, I guess, Turtle Mania, when that was a big thing. And then the second book was I don't remember the exact issue number, but it was an issue of the Transformers.
Oh, I loved the Transformers.
Yes,
yeah.
and it was for listeners out there who have better memories than I do with numbers. It was one of the earlier issues, and the cover was Shockwave fighting Megatron while a helicopter was in the foreground.
Oh.
And I remember picking that one up specifically in the store and being kind of enthralled by just the cover. I thought it was cool that two bad guys were fighting each other.
Yeah, doing a power struggle there. So I do think I remember that. I'm seeing if I can find it right now on the, if only we had an interconnected series of computers networked together that would allow us to look things up.
I know.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Someone needs to go out and invent one of those.
Here it is. Yeah, I got the issue right here, and it is, see if I can find it. I know it's one of the lower issues.
It is. It has a yellow cover.
Yeah, it's in the single digits.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it.
It's in one of the first
6.
15.
It's number 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had a miniseries through 4, and so this was pretty early on. Yeah, and there's the helicopter and everything. Good memory. So, so what was it about those that, like, you're like, I want to do this? Like, do you remember what about that was? Or do you just really into them, or was there something specifically that I want to be a part of doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's just the fact that my mother actually taught me how to draw when we were kids, and that was the one hobby, that was the only thing I was really good at besides book learning, was being able to draw. And when I was a child, all of my classmates said I drew really well, so that was a nice boost to self-esteem. I actually didn't even think about, I think when I thought about drawing comics was when we were asked in school what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I remember thinking to myself, that'd be really cool if that could be done. Now, obviously, there was a lot of pressure from the outside that said, well, you can't do it because they don't make any money. And I just thought to myself, well, dang it, that doesn't really seem like a very feasible route to take. But I think I always kept it in the back of my mind. And at some point in my life, it changed from doing comics to doing covers because I found out that I was pretty good at static images, but hadn't exactly mastered how to do things in sequence. But I think years of comic book collecting has really attributed to that and really influenced kind of my decision to go ahead and re-pursue that field.
Well, I think one of the things that I personally lament a little bit, now there's some amazing cover art going on right now. Don't mishear me, but I miss the cover that would grab your attention, but also tell a little bit of the story and tease you onto what was going to happen. It made you want to go, well, I got to see what's going to happen. And you don't see as much of that anymore. Now it's, it's almost like a lot of times covers used to be almost like a big panel from the inside of the issue that kind of sold, hey, this is what this is going to be about. And now, I mean, covers can these days not really even have anything to do with what's going on inside. But I'm not in the industry, so I would assume that they know that those sell more comics. I don't know, like it just makes it jump out of the rack or something. I don't know.
I don't know either. In fact, you're the second person besides a YouTuber named Diversity in Comics to point that out. And he said that he missed the covers of not even too long ago, less than 20 years ago. When,
that's about what I'm thinking.
Yeah, when covers used to have dialogue on them. And for example, you'd have Spider-Man on the cover and he looks like he's been defeated. And they didn't just leave the image as such. There would be text saying, Venom has defeated Spider-Man. Is this Spider-Man's last stand? Find out on the inside.
Oh, yeah.
And I love books like that. In fact, in my library of art books and references, I have quite a number of collections of what they call vintage covers, where it's nothing, a lot of it's like, for example, men's adventure covers and a lot of work from the 40s through the 60s, where every cover.
They're like fighting a shark. Yeah.
Right, or fighting rabid crabs. I don't even know if crabs can get rabies, but things of that nature. And they intrigued you because not only was the image appealing, but they gave a lot of verbiage that would make you think, oh my goodness, I have to pick this up and see what's on the inside.
Well, that's what makes me wonder, what has changed, because that's what I grew up on, was that, like basically the cover was a cliffhanger that made you want to, and I miss the big, huge splash pages, that of like the 80s and the 70s and part of the 90s, where you'd get these ridiculous splash pages, when you first open the comic. But, genres change, mediums change, whatever. Some of it's probably nostalgia, and it probably doesn't make that big of a difference in the end of the day. But I do miss those.
I do too. Yeah. And I think part of the reason why is because, and I'm not blaming Alex Ross for this, but I think he was definitely the originator of it. You had an A-lister like Alex Ross, and when he came on the scene, it was kind of novel, this idea that you could have a master painter doing your covers. And I think that philosophy essentially translated to, well, the art is so good, you don't need any text. The art speaks for itself. And so now, as a result of that, you have a lot of very good painters, a lot of really A-list talent coming out and doing covers. A lot of them I know personally, and they're very good people, such as Art Germ. He's in high demand right now because his covers are so good. But I think it's the philosophy that the art is so good, there's no point in putting text on it because that just takes away from the overall art. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but back in the day, the cover was an immersive experience where you're trying to sell the book on both the art and what potentially lies on the inside. Yeah,
now there's literally people who now will buy the book purely for the cover.
That's how I am.
The variants and stuff. I'm into and I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to make sure to talk about your book. I dig the variant covers for the fact that it gives people more work, the artists more work. People like the variant covers. It drives me nuts that I can't scan the rack and know, do I already have that issue or not? Because from my perspective, variant covers are still kind of a new thing, because we didn't have that back in like the 80s and all that, so it's still kind of a new thing to me mentally, even though they've been out forever, they've been around for a while, but that still messes me up. But if it's good for the industry and it makes people happy and it gives people like you more work, good, and I finally, Michelle over at, Collector's Edition showed me how to read the barcode, to know if it's a variant cover or not, cause I used to get on my phone and go, is this the variant cover? And now they're putting in the credit. But anyway, okay. What we're going to talk about, I wanted to ask you one last question. Unfortunately, we'll have to keep this a little short because I want to get us to a break. And then I want to talk about your book, Thump, The First Bundred Days. Are you reading anything right now that you want to call out or give a shout out to that you think is good or special?
Anything IDW puts out is really good.
I'm impressed with IDW right now.
They've been doing
a lot of stuff.
They've been doing a solid piece of work. The other thing too is if your listeners out there have not read Red Hood and the Outlaws from the Rebirth, featuring Scott Lobdell, that's a very good trade paperback series to get into.
Okay, cool. All right, so those are the two things that you would call out at the moment. So we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we will be talking with Timothy Lim about his new book coming out, and we're also going to find out that he's not afraid to go against the grain a little bit in the industry he's in. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to throw a little love at a sponsor. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more with comics artist and illustrator Timothy Lim, a.k.a. Ninjaink. All right, so some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. For all your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. Remember, if you're listening on 99.5 Faith Talk, that we're on a temporary station change through November 11th. Normal home station for Shane Plays Geek Talk is 96.5. And we're rebroadcasting on 96.5 during this time on 5 p.m. on Sundays. My guest is illustrator and comics artist Timothy Lim, who also happens to be a doctor of audiology. And he's also got a new book coming out. So I want to make sure, before we get into anything else, go ahead and tell us about Thump, the First Bundred Days.
So Thump, the First Bundred Days is an illustrated 56-page story, and it recounts the 2016 election. But the twist is that it uses animals. It was actually written for adults, but it's safe for children. So it's an all-ages book. Anyone can pick it up. It's a political satire. I think that one thing that makes it stand out from the market is it's the only illustrated pro-Trump children's book out there. It follows the adventures of Thump, a distinguished rabbit with very recognizable hair, and his basket of adorables as they make their way across the land and try to make America great again. And it's going to be available in stores by October 31st. So if this is a recorded session, then it'll be available.
It'll
right
be out.
now.
Yeah, because this should broadcast on November 4th. Again, yeah, let me also mention this is pre-recorded. This is not a live show today because I'm actually at work right now, working due to the magical of radio and time travel. So is it a graphic novel? Is it an illustrated book? Like what is the format?
It's an illustrated book. So it's 56 pages. There's basically each page is an illustration. It's told in a children's book format, and it's told entirely with rhyming couplets. So it rhymes. It's a book that you can actually read to your children if you want. And as I said, even though we wrote it with adult type humor in mind, there's no adult jokes in it. And so a child can read it and completely love it. And adults can read it, and there's some, I guess, hidden humor in there that they'll get that children probably won't understand until they grow older.
Okay. So I'm showing here that you're listed. I'm on the Amazon page for this. I'm showing that you're listed as an author, and then is it Mark Pellegrini?
Mark Pellegrini.
Yeah,
he's my co-author.
Okay, and then Brett R. Smith.
Mm-hmm. And Brett R. Smith, he was the editor of Clinton Cash, the graphic novel.
Okay.
So he worked pretty closely with Chuck Dixon and Peter Schweitzer on that one. And he is actually a major veteran of the comics industry. He's pretty much worked for every major publisher as a colorist, and that's his job.
So is that what he did on this book, or what was his job on this book?
He was basically the spearheader. So he found a project very enticing when I pitched it to him. He got us the publicist. He made the edits, the corrections, and he's sort of heading up our marketing campaign. He's kind of a one-size-fits-all kind of guy.
All right.
Even though I did most of the art, 99% of it, he actually came in and gave me pointers in terms of color correction, edits, and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, very, very cool. So this is Thump, the First Bundred Days. It's available starting now. Amazon has it as October 31st. What day did you say? Is that
That's
right?
correct. October 31st.
So October 31st. So by the time this airs either on the radio or goes out as a podcast, the book should be available. Now, so let's kind of shift over into another somewhat related topic here. Now, Shane Plays is not specifically a political show. I have been involved in politics. I've been elected to office twice. I've helped people run campaigns. I try to be an activist. I try to get information out there. But, Shane Plays, my geek stuff is where I try to get away from all that. Unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder to get away from politics in our geek. And normally that politics comes from one side of the aisle. And people who tend to stand up for the other side of the aisle are getting massive vitriol, blowback, attacked, whatever. Mitch Breitweiser, of course, is a perfect example. He posted one picture on Twitter and they howled for his blood and wanted to get his wife fired, who had nothing to do with, just stuff like that. So you don't hide the fact that you are a conservative that is in the comic book industry.
Correct.
And anybody who knows the industry right now, that's practically a sin. So what is it like to be a conservative in the industry, or what have you experienced?
Well, the good thing is this. So the way I got involved with it was actually because of Mitch. So what had happened was it was actually the night of the election. And up until this point, for 7 years, I've known pretty much no one except liberals in the industry, and that's fine. Something that people don't realize is you go into the industry knowing that as the fact. That's the de facto truth, de facto open secret.
Right.
And I remember the night of the election, after the victory, I kind of asked myself, well, I can't share in the victory with anyone because no one in my industry is conservative. And one of my friends, whose name I'm not going to disclose, I told him this, and he said, well, I need to introduce you to some people then and take a look at this. And he actually introduced me to about 200 different underground artists and creators.
So it's the secret inner group of conservatives.
It is, and we're spread out, and you'd be surprised as to who's on that list, and most people are not vocal, and they know we can't say
because
anything.
they know that, I mean, they could potentially lose work.
Right.
It may not be overt.
Right.
But they will.
And I think an important thing for listeners to know is this is the main attack that we've been getting. They said, well, are you not a hypocrite because you're essentially putting yourself out there as a person trying to state a political opinion when the reality is that's what you're trying to get some of these people for? And my retort to that is I'm not trying to necessarily usurp things by interjecting my politics, but I'm trying to even the playing field. For example, John De La Rose, he wrote that scathing article where he looked at the people listed on Marvel's webpage, writers and artists, and he went through every single one of them and looked at their Twitter feed and wanted to see were they liberal or conservative. 100% of them were liberal. So the entire main Marvel core staff has come out and identified themselves as liberal. Now, we all know about biases. How in the world can you even pretend to be objective when no one in your main staff is identified as a conservative? That is going to seep into your books at some point. And so I think a lot of us, I think it's partly subconscious zeitgeist. A lot of us are just kind of fed up. And in trying
I'm fed up with, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I talk about this a little bit on the show. I am absolutely fed up with two things. I'm fed up with, especially on Marvels. I haven't bought a Marvel book in a couple of years. Well, when, I was telling you, and I've shared on the show before, after the Iceman thing, and then after the Captain America being a Nazi right before Memorial Day, I just haven't done. Right. It's just getting to where I can't even ignore this. So I'm fed up with, there's a difference between social commentary and social conditioning. I'm fed up with social conditioning and what I want to be my escape from all of this junk.
Right.
And then I'm fed up with seeing conservatives be absolutely pilloried over sharing even a mild opinion. Yeah. I'm really fed up with that, which is one of the reasons why I'm wanting you to kind of share, you're actually in the industry.
Right. And that's a big thing is if the industry had kind of gone in at least the storytelling trajectory as it did in the 90s, where it was just stories being told, then I wouldn't have a problem with it. In fact, the need or the necessity for a book like Thump or My Hero MAGADEMIA wouldn't even exist. There would be no need for it to exist because we would never have to fight against anything. Now what we're telling people is it's a fight. We're creating content to simply fight back against what we consider to be kind of a political backlash. And it's a shame because I really wish that we could all agree with each other. And I think I mentioned this on the show last time when we were with Dave, but I said, someone once told me that you can always tell who a good writer is because after you're done reading something, you know more about the characters. You know who a poor writer is because you're done reading something and you only know more about the writer. In other words, it's as if the characters are nothing more than sock puppets or stand-ins
for their
views. And I'll say this: a lot of people are saying, "Well, we need to boycott you. We need to get rid of you from the industry." And what I tell them is, 7 years.
Why? What in your work?
Exactly.
Right. What in the work you have put out in the industry is offensive.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Right.
I guess some people could argue that. He put out a book on Thump that wasn't, awful and saying how awful Trump was.
Right.
But in the comic book industry, what have you done? That's
nothing so far. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you had people literally trying to get Elizabeth Breitweiser fired off of projects she was working on for something her husband did.
Right.
It's just out of control. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And not just that, but what I tell people, what I think frustrates me the most is 7 years of working in merchandise and about 2 years working in comics. I've worked for feminists. I'm the guy who created the Carol Core logo for Kelly Sue DeConnick. And her politics are not mine, but it was a paying job.
Yeah, it's a job.
Recently, there was a big Bernie supporter who has a comic out called Righteous. And it's not very political, but it definitely has the whole kind of a a hippie mentality where it's like, what if everyone in the world had to do nice things for each other? I knew he was a Bernie supporter, but he was very nice, and he paid me for work doing 2 covers for him, and I did it. And not once in all these years has a conservative messaged me and said, well, I can't support you anymore because of this work that you've done. Recently, having done Thump, and I also did work for Sebastian Gorka, we did a nice birthday present for him.
Right.
And I got a message 2 days ago, and it's from someone saying, I am so sorry I ever bought anything by you.
Right.
I'm going to boycott all your work.
This is what I'm talking about.
Exactly. And I thought, and I didn't reply because I like my fans. I mean,
Yeah.
I will never attack my fans. I will attack SJW mentalities, but I try not to offend my individual fans. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the tolerance does not work both ways. I noticed that it really is.
It really doesn't. I mean, I've experienced it myself too, being in politics. What the irony that absolutely puts me on the floor that I see in this is one of the reasons why they think it's so important to, advance like the liberal agenda or what have you, is so that people's rights will be protected. So they preemptively, proactively start taking your rights so that you won't take yours when there's no threat of that happening at all.
Right.
That's what kills me. They're running on emotion, not logic. Now, hear me. I know there's people probably listening to this podcast or radio show that are getting very upset right now. You can be a Democrat, or you can be a liberal, or you can be whatever, and that doesn't mean you behave this way. But they're just like there's a extreme right, which bothers me as a conservative. There's an extreme left, and the extreme left can be very caustic and aggressive and nasty, and damage people, damage their livelihood, and it's bad.
Yeah, and that's why I try to make a distinction between liberals and SJWs.
Right.
SJWs are the people who will go after you and pillory you. Liberals, I mean, that can go anywhere between a classical liberal to a libertarian, and I'm not trying to put
There's
them
a
into one
difference.
basket.
Right.
But the one thing I'll tell your listeners is this. For example, 2 of the writers I love, they're liberal. But what I like about them is that their characters are so rich that you can't tell.
Right.
One of them being Garth Ennis, who writes a great Punisher book. Peter David right now, he's writing Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, and I love that book. I think it's wonderful. And so there's ways that you can do it. One of the greatest quotes I ever heard was when Alan Moore was commenting on Watchmen. And one of the things that he said was, so obviously the breakout character in Watchmen is Rorschach. Everyone loves Rorschach. Everyone loves Rorschach. And he said that when he was writing Rorschach, he found Rorschach's politics so dangerous and so disgusting to him. But he had to continue because that was the character. And he had to go to where the character led him. The character in his mind existed independent of him, the writer. And I thought that was brilliant. And I think that's something missing in a lot of media nowadays, is that writers can't separate themselves from the character. The character is nothing more than a sock puppet for the writer.
So here, and unfortunately I got to draw us to a close. But thanks for sharing, because even you sharing that small little bit right there, somebody's going to get really upset at.
That's fine.
Right? I mean, they're going to be like, I'm never listening to Shane Plays again because he let this guy talk. And okay, so be it. I'm talking about it more these days because it's impacting the industry that I love more and more. And so here's what it comes down to me. And people are like, well, they've always talked about politics in comic books, you hypocrite. The very first issue of Captain America, he's punching Hitler. Okay, stay with me for a second. There's always been social commentary. And here's a perfect example when Green Arrow and Green Lantern went on their journey across America. And it was a classic series in the comic book industry where Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, represented the more conservative viewpoint, and Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, represented the more liberal. And they went on a journey across America, and they had great commentary on the state of America at that time. Okay, that's commentary. That's always been in comic books. Okay, some of the very, some of the really good storylines that have been in comic books ever have been commentary in some form or another. Star Trek is commentary. Right? All the stuff. Conditioning is where you start trying to, without giving people a chance to evaluate the debate on both sides, you start using characters and scenarios to by default normalize behavior that you may or may not agree with, or opinions. And I'm not going to say it's brainwashing, but when you suddenly, when the comic book industry people at Marvel are like, man, well, look at this rise in conservatism, and all of a sudden Captain America is a Nazi. I'm not stupid. Nobody's dumb here, right? This isn't just interesting storytelling. You know, they're making the point that, you know, well, if Captain America can be a Nazi, well, can the president be a Nazi? Right? That's the point they're trying to make. And I always come back to Iceman. Iceman has been established since the 60s as being a heterosexual male. Since the 60s. Suddenly, a couple of years ago, he's gay because they want to show what it's like to come out and all of this stuff. So my thing is, if you want to reflect society and you want to put gay characters, ethnic characters, whatever the character is, that's fine. Introduce new and compelling characters that represent that. Don't co-opt the existing, because what you're doing is you're taking the history that character has and suddenly co-opting it and hijacking it and connecting it up to things that people may or may not believe, but the weight of that character's history suddenly gives legitimacy to what they're trying to say is legitimate. So sorry for the rant. I mean, would you agree with that? Or I mean,
no, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And I think the big issue is the hijacking of characters that were established already canonically as being one thing and then being changed to something
suddenly
else.
Changed like that. You know, like when, we're running out of time, unfortunately.
Well, one big one I want to address is, for example, there's a rule with the Disney Corporation, and it's with Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is such an icon of Americana that the rules around his licensure are very strict. It takes a long time to approve something with Mickey Mouse on it because they treat his character with a sense of sacredness. I would argue that in the Marvel universe, Captain America and Spider-Man are their flagship characters. You need to treat these people with a lot more delicate hands, just as the Disney Corporation does with the mouse, because these are characters that children love. And if you're perverting them to suit an agenda or tell a story that frankly no one wants to hear, then you're only damaging yourself.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. If the only way that you can make your point is by hijacking something, your point may not be as strong as you think it is.
Absolutely.
Right. That's kind of, if you can't tell, you know, anyway, I could froth at the mouth here for a while because I bottle all this stuff up because I try to let Shane Plays be I think you even mentioned that you've heard the show and it's kind of positive and fun. And, you know, I try not to make Shane Plays about this, but you know, I'm getting more and more concerned because the comic book industry is like it's an American industry. It's in some ways it's uniquely American, and you know, I grew up loving it. It's hard for me to put into words how much I love comic books and the characters and what it's been in my life, and to see, you know, that what they're doing. Like I had a guy in here, Nick Cochran, one time. He's got a Captain America ring that his wife gave him as a gift, and now he's like, I don't even want to wear it. He's a Nazi, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, it's like, anyway, I hate to do this. I got to wrap us up. Tell us again about your book, Timothy, and then I'm gonna take us out.
Sure. So the book is called Thump, The First Bundred Days. We've actually made it to our second printing. It's available right now.
That many pre-orders?
It has been pre-ordered. And
wow.
If you listen to a previous show on Dave Ellswick, it's because the Mary Sue called me a Nazi.
Oh, yeah. We got it. Okay. So, no. You got called a white supremacist.
And a Nazi.
What is your background?
I'm Asian.
Yeah, you're a white supremacist.
I'm a white supremacist, apparently.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we got a boost in sales. So we...
Thank you, Mary Sue.
Thank you very much, Mary Sue. We're at our second printing. Thump, The First Bundred Days, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million, online and in stores as of the time that this is airing. You can pick it up, check it out. I am local, so if you ever hit me up at a local convention.
And local is like, people by podcast, where I say live or
Little
not,
Rock, Arkansas.
from Little Rock, Little Rock, Central Arkansas area. So, well, Timothy, I've enjoyed having you. You're always welcome back.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the exclusive that you're going to be doing some sequential work with. Was it
My Hero Magademia.
My Hero Magademia.
I have not announced the publisher. We have a publisher, but I have not announced it yet.
All right.
But I think you're the first podcast to get the news.
All right, man. Thank you for the exclusive.
You're welcome.
All right, I got to do this to you. I apologize, but I don't know. I know you said you've listened to the show before. I have a bad joke of the week.
Okay.
Are you ready for the bad joke of the week?
I am ready.
This one's really bad, so please don't hate me. All right. Why don't skeletons ever go out for a night on the town?
Why?
They've got nobody to go with.
But no.
All right. This has been Timothy Lim, a.k.a. Ninjaink. You know what? My brain is weird. I'm like, I want to see Ninjaink versus Ninjaink, right? What would happen in a cage match, right? But anyway, that's just the way my brain works. But anyway, thanks for coming on. Best of luck with Thump, the First Bundred Days, and all of your your other comic book work and all that stuff. And like I said, you're definitely welcome back on the show.
Thank you very much, Shane.
All right, folks, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays.
Can you hear me now? Good. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Good. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Good.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.